Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sal Kelly. I am presenting a series of 10 videos on the subject of self-empowerment. Now, when you hear the term self-empowerment, you might be thinking of, oh, I'm going to be really effective in the world. I'm going to make more sales in my sales position. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to influence more people. And certainly the term self-empowerment has been used for the success motivation, how to win friends and influence people, as Dale Carnegie would say. In fact, he has the most successful self-help book of all time, How to Win Friends and Influence People, by Dale Carnegie. This is not a or what you call success motivation course. This is, we'll say it's metaphysical, it's spiritual, and it's scientific. What exactly is required in order for you to tap into your true power? The power that is inherent within you because God placed it there. The kingdom of heaven is within. Perhaps you've heard that expression. Well, it's literally true. The new physics is proving that indeed the entire universe exists within each one of us. It is like a hologram. Within a hologram, you have the whole contained within the parts. That's one of the principles of a hologram. There's many others. In this case, the whole universe is a holographic projection of a single point called a singularity. But we're not going to get real deep into the physics of self-empowerment because we want a course that is practical, that you can use in your everyday life. Though many of you are saying, well, what he's saying sounds great, but I have bills to pay, I have to learn how to get along with my partner and my children. So we're going to make this course as practical as possible. And we have to start at the beginning. Now, I know that some of you have been following my work for many years. You've read many of my books, and for those of you who are already familiar with my work, some of this is definitely going to be review, but it still should be bringing forth many of the things I've been talking about for a lot of years from a new angle, a new perspective. So even if it's review for you, please join us, be part of these videos. And if you're brand new to this work, welcome. You will hopefully find something of value in this series of videos. This is a 10-part series on self-empowerment, and we're going to start from the very beginning. And the very beginning is defining, first of all, what is the self and what is power. We better define our terms before we go too much further. So the self is a bit of a mystery, and it actually comes in two flavors: the little self and the big self or higher self, or the lower self and the higher self, the little human ego, and the soul, oversoul, monad, and there's other levels to the higher self as well. What in my book, Soul Integration, I call the lower self, it has 6 dimensions, and the higher self has 6 dimensions. So it's the 6 higher levels is the higher self, and the 6 lower levels is the lower self. But we're going to get a little bit more simple than that, and we're going to define it basically as ego and spirit, or ego and higher self. And we're going to answer questions such as, how can you tell whether you're coming from ego or from higher self? And we're going to give you a simple answer right at the beginning of these series of videos. The simple answer depends on motivation. What is your motivation for wanting self-empowerment? What is your motivation for anything that you desire in life? Ego is always coming from lack and limitation. Ego always wants something from outside of itself in order to be fulfilled. I am lacking in some way. I need something from the world out there, which ultimately is an illusion, but we think there's a world out there, in order to satisfy the world in here, which is also an illusion. There's actually no separation between the inner reality and the outer reality, and we're going to go into that in just a little bit here. So we're defining self as two parts: the little self or human ego, and the big self, which I also call the true self or the authentic self. And I like to use the analogy of a fractal. In fractal geometry, you have beautiful, intricate, ever-changing kaleidoscopic patterns that are going continuously. They're expanding and contracting simultaneously into infinity. But the function that generates the fractal is constant. It's eternal. It's unchanging. And it's called a recursive function. You put the output and you reinsert the output into the input so that you're continuously adding the output to the input. That's called a recursive function. A perfect example of that is the Fibonacci sequence. You have 1 plus 1 equals 2. You feed that number back in. 1 plus 2 equals 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5. 3 plus 5 equals 8. 5 plus 8 equals 13, etc. So that's a recursive function where the output becomes the next input. And it produces the most amazingly beautiful patterns when you generate, using a supercomputer, these fractals. The most popular one is called the Mandelbrot Set, and you can put it into a search engine and type in Mandelbrot Set, and you may be able to generate this beautiful pattern, but the function remains the same. It is a very simple algebraic function. Why am I talking about this? Because your higher self is like the function. It is beyond time and space, which means it is eternal and unchanging. It includes time and space, but it is beyond it. And so we use the concept of sets and subsets. Remember that from mathematics? You have a set of counting numbers or integers, which is an infinite set, and then you have the set of rational numbers, which is infinitely larger than the subset of counting numbers. All of the counting numbers are contained within the rational numbers. All of the rational numbers are contained within the real numbers, and all of the real numbers are contained within the complex numbers. So it is a sets and subsets idea. Why am I bringing this up? Because we're dealing with dimensions of reality. The lower self is contained within the higher self. And so it's a little more complicated than that, because we have 6 lower selves, each one bigger and more inclusive than the previous one, and 6 higher selves, each one bigger and more inclusive than the ones before it. So all of the lower levels of self are contained within the higher levels of self. And when you talk about transcending something, you're talking about going from the more localized, specific sets into the more dynamic, expanded, all-encompassing sets. So you literally go beyond the limited viewpoint of reality when you go from the lower self to the higher self. Now we're going to be discussing how do you balance the human ego, which is the sense of a separate self, with the higher self, which is the sense of being one with everything, which is being one with the universe, and the universe is one being expressing through multiple forms, billions of life forms. That's the higher self perspective. But the lower self believes that it is separate from the whole. I am a little separate self, and it's based on this false identity that we're given when we come into this world. Basically, we think, okay, I'm a human being, I belong to this family, these are my parents, these are my children, this is my work. And so we have this little identity that we use in this world. It's necessary in order to function in the world, but it's very limited, and it's not ultimately real. It's based on a series of thoughts. If somebody says, is ego real? Well, yes, ego is a series of electronic impulses that go through the synapses of the brain, which we call thoughts. It's a collection of thoughts. And it gives rise to the illusion of a separate self, because the idea of separation is an illusion. There is no actual separation. There's no difference between the inner and the outer reality. There's just reality. Of course, you can try to find the inner self by cutting open the body, looking for it. Oh, no, it's in the brain. Okay, let's cut open the brain, looking for the little self. Well, of course, you're not going to find it. What you find is a receiver. This is a device which receives impulses from consciousness. Consciousness is the non-local field. So, we use the analogy of the radio, and inside the radio you hear music. And so imagine how silly it would be to open up the radio and look for little tiny musicians playing instruments inside your radio. Obviously that's not how it works. The music is non-local to the device which is receiving it. All you're getting is a series of signals being broadcast from a transmitter somewhere into your little device. And it's like that with consciousness, the higher self or real self, and the brain, which is the receiver. So inside the brain is not the place to find the inner self. It is a non-local field, meaning it's outside this little time-space construct we call our brain and body. It's very much like the concept of radio waves carrying the sound waves, and of course the musicians were probably in a studio somewhere a long time ago, recorded it, put it on a medium, and then it gets transmitted through the air. So it's similar when we're talking about our true self, our higher self, our real authentic self, transmitting vibrations into this little receiver we call our human brain. So we hope we're going slowly enough that everybody's with us. Are you with us? Good. Okay. So let's talk about another way of looking at lower self and higher self. And why is this relevant? Because in order to be self-empowered, you have to be able to merge your lower self and your higher self and get them working together through a process we call soul integration. And we're going to go into depth in soul integration later in this series of videos. But for now, we're going to introduce a couple more concepts. And one is, we mentioned that the lower self is like a very narrow band of information contained within a larger realm. And so we bring to your mind the light and sound spectrums. The color spectrum has all this area over here called infrared, which is the lower frequencies, a tiny little gap, just a little strip, which we call the visible light spectrum, going from red to violet through the colors of the rainbow. And then we have this vast realm over here called the ultraviolet, which is the higher frequencies. So we have a vast realm of higher frequencies that's beyond what can be seen with our eyes, and a vast realm of lower frequencies, which is beyond what we can see with our eyes but lower frequencies. So in the lower frequencies we have things like radio waves, and in the higher frequencies we have X-rays, gamma rays, things like that. And so the part of reality we can see is just this tiny little strip in between these vast invisible or spiritual realms. So this is scientific proof that the physical universe is contained within a much, much larger spiritual universe. And we can do the same for the sound spectrum. We can say this is the range of frequencies that we can hear with our ears, and these are the frequencies that are too low to be heard, and these are the frequencies that are too high to be heard. So we are only viewing a tiny fraction of reality with our physical senses. Not only that, we're not seeing things as they actually are. We know that this is mostly vibrating energy and empty space, but we call it solid. It feels solid, it looks solid, but it's just vibrating energy in a large area of empty space. So it's not the way that we perceive it. Yes, there's really a physical world, there's really a body, but it is nothing like the way our senses tell us it is. Not only that, we never see the present. We're always looking into the past. When we look at an object, it takes a few nanoseconds for the light to reach our eyes and be decoded by the brain and interpreted by the brain and the senses. And if you look further out into space, let's say you're looking at the moon, it takes maybe a couple of seconds for the light of the moon to reach the earth. You look at the sun, it takes about 8 minutes for the light of the sun to reach the earth. And if you look at distant galaxies, you may be looking millions of years into the past, because you're seeing it the way it was millions of years ago. It takes the light that long to reach the telescope that you're looking at the distant galaxy through. So we're always looking into the past when we're physically observing the physical universe. So we're not seeing anything the way it is right now, and we're definitely not seeing it the way it actually is. We're seeing what appears to be solid objects, but we know they're just vibrating energy with a lot of empty space, 99.999% empty space. So the world is not an illusion, but the way we perceive the world is definitely an illusion. And the world we see is colored by our thoughts, by our consciousness. We see the world we expect to see based on our belief systems, our programming, and our conditioning. And this is the real metaphysical key to self-empowerment. If you were brought up with a core negative belief that you are powerless, guess what? Your beliefs are incredibly powerful. They are so powerful that you can convince yourself that you're powerless, and guess what? You'll experience powerlessness because your thoughts are that powerful, your beliefs are that powerful. Beliefs are just a collection of related thoughts that are kind of organized into a perception of reality. So if you grow up believing that you are powerless and helpless, and that there's not much you can do to affect the world, you're just one little being in a whole vast realm, and there's not much you can do, you're going to believe that, then you're going to experience that, if that's your belief. So we do have to go into our subconscious mind, and we do have to reprogram all of these belief systems that are causing us to experience powerlessness. So, what is the first thing you do? You recognize an eternal truth, and I'm going to give you this eternal truth right at the beginning here. I am a powerful, creative, spiritual being. This is what you say to yourself. It's your affirmation. It is a statement of truth. We just proved that it's true. You live in this vast spiritual universe, even though your physical senses only see a tiny little bit, and your thoughts are incredibly powerful, so powerful that you can convince yourself you're powerless. So we know you are a powerful, creative, spiritual being. You're always creating. That can be proven. Right in this very moment as you're watching this video, you're creating. You may not be aware of everything you're creating, but you are creating, and you're powerful in this very moment, as we already discussed. And you're a spiritual being, as we already discussed. So this is your affirmation. I am a powerful, creative, spiritual being. So start with that affirmation. And now, as we go through the various steps of this video, we're going to take a look at how we are programmed and conditioned in so many ways that are disempowering, that do not support our ability to recognize that we are already powerful. It's not something we have to attain. There's nothing here to attain. There's a lot to remember. There's a lot to realize. And that's why it's called self-realization. Self-realization is not just for a few yogis sitting in caves high up in the Himalayan mountains. It is for all of us, if we so choose. Free will says we can choose to embrace the truth of who we are, or we can continue believing the lies and deception that are fed to us by our so-called authority figures in life. And of course, we can go into a list of all the ways that we are taught that we are powerless, that we don't really matter, that we're just, miserable, helpless, little weak human beings, that we need Big Daddy government or Big Daddy religion or some other system in order to save us, because we have forgotten that we are created in the image and likeness of our Creator. Genesis chapter 1 of the Christian Bible. We are created in the image and likeness of God. So what does that really mean? What does it say? Omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, Omnipresent means God is everywhere at once, beyond time and space. Omniscient means all-knowing. And omnipotent or omnipotent means all-powerful. So if we were created in the image and likeness of an all-powerful force, an all-powerful source of energy, which we call God, then it's right there in front of us, that we have the same powers that our Creator has. We are powerful, creative, spiritual beings. Now you might say, well, he keeps talking about that over and over. Yes, if I repeat something, there's a really good reason I repeat it, because it's something you really need to get. That statement alone, if you really get it, is enough to be self-empowered. But of course, there's a lot more to this, and you'll find and discover more principles as we go through the different steps of these videos. So we're going to look at our core negative beliefs and how to heal our negative emotions, how to heal all of the things which seem to be blocking us from powerfully manifesting in our lives. So again, we're telling you that there's no difference between inner and outer reality. There's just reality. We have conveniently mentally categorized things as inner and outer, which is sometimes useful when we're communicating with other human beings. But it's not really like that. There is one being expressing through many bodies, and that one being is everywhere present within you and seemingly outside you, in this imaginary idea of a world out there that is separate from who you are. So these are the basic foundational concepts and principles that you need to grasp in order to be self-empowered. Now in the second video, we're going to, in the second part of this 10-part series, we're going to talk about what is power. And we're going to look at power from different points of view, and we're going to then go into some other ideas that are necessary in order to manifest your powerful, creative, spiritual abilities. So we look forward to joining you in the next video. Thank you.